the impact of poverty and joblessness and depression. I mean, by the way, what happens to somebody in solitary confinement in prison, right? They get sick. Okay, it's one of the most stressful things you can put people through. Isolation is causing unknown amounts of health problems that we are going to have to deal with going forward. And it's very sad because I remember at the beginning of the year seeing optimism and joy and a sense of a willingness to go out and take risks in building businesses. In my community, people were opening stores and restaurants, and now these people are boarding them up. What's going to happen?
We're going to have more bankruptcies, more unemployment, and it's truly a massive impact. And honestly, when this is said and done, I don't think we're going to have properly measured that. And the challenge is going to be, how do we revitalize? It's going to take, it takes a while. It takes years after 3 or 4 months of impact to bring the economies back. The virus is not going away, right? The virus is still going to be the environment.
No. It's going to be part of the environment forever.
Exactly.
And it may have already been, and Bob, isn't it true? It could have been here before 6 months ago. Like, we're reading this piece on coronaviruses from 6 years ago. They said we'd have 2/3 of us would have it. So there's a lot of assumptions that we're making along the way when science needs to have assumptions that are tested, but we didn't test them in this environment. We made those assumptions, we ran our algorithms, and we went. And again, nobody had bad intent. All these politicians committing, an emergency when there's one death in the state, they're just being told by everybody else, this is what's going to grow to. I saw the governor of Ohio call a declaration of emergency, and he said, we're going to have 100,000 people infected here. And then, the one intelligent reporter said there's only 1,120 infections in the whole country right now. How can you say 100,000 in your state? And he said, well, it's going to double from 100,000 in a few weeks, and we're going to have all these deaths. And so he said, well, I'm being told that by the experts. He put his expert on, a doctor, really great lady, and she apologized, says, I was really exhausted this morning when I made these predictions. She literally says this on the air. And then she said afterwards, but other experts have been telling me it's about 1%, it'll keep doubling. So we have made these decisions, and now it's going to be hard not to do. They all came from the best intent, protect our people. But we're getting to the real numbers, they're a bit challenging. So how do you explain a place like Sweden that's got a population like that, and it's not out of control, and they're not doing what we're doing here? Schools are open, primary schools are open, preschools are open with little children, restaurants are open, people in the streets.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there were two approaches to this, right? One approach up front was to understand the possible bad side of this virus and calculate the worst case scenario, present it like that, but deal with it as mid case or best case scenario, right? And take conservative measures. For example, you just pointed out the vast majority of people who do very poorly are the very old or the ones with comorbidities. So right off the bat, selective isolation of the high-risk groups might have been a more conservative measure. Now, are younger people getting sick and dying? Yeah, absolutely. But the reality is, the way you approach a crisis like this is either hysteria or rational thinking. And it's very sad. I don't blame Dr. Fauci. I do blame the media. Because, as Peter taught me, people are designed to pay 10 times more attention to bad news than good news. And so you give the media a little bit of bad news and they run with it, okay? And they sit there and they wallow in the panic they create. You know why? Because the more panic they create, people won't change the channel, right? They'll stay and they'll listen. So the truth of the matter is, we did a disservice to the public by not fully informing them on how the numbers were arrived at, letting other experts opine. I hate when just one person is the sole source of information, right? We need to engage a lot of other folks. And by the way, there are people who try to get the word out and they're suppressed. Let's look at one other thing.
They shouted them down towards some of the solutions, as you know, Bob. And I'm not here to attack the media either. I think the media is trying to do its job, but they're no longer designed to inform us. It's too competitive. Now they got to startle us. And the only thing that startles is something huge. And so they also believe it. They're not asking the questions. Okay, we have this many cases. How many are actually hospitalized? Or how does this compare to flu deaths? None of those questions are being asked. It's just full force. It gets all the attention. And now there are people that they've heard it for week after week, day after day, that it's like religion to them. They pretend it's science, but they say people are dying, or you're promoting people, doing things that are dangerous if you inform people that the numbers are different than they are. That's just not true. So let's move into, what are the things that we do? There's lots of great solutions that are showing up right now for someone who's in a severe situation, usually with other challenges, as you've already pointed out, pre-existing conditions. Let's talk about the solutions, and then Bob, let's see if we can't give people just a little bit of history about cellular medicine, all the way back to where you're kind of the father of it to some extent because of the research you did with the rats 30 years ago. So let's pick which direction everyone you want to grab first. Let's move in that direction now. Hopefully, if you're listening, we've got you at least the question that it isn't a severe, extreme thing as you think, and it doesn't have to be in your life that way. If you understand the numbers, you still want to do things that take care of yourself. But 90% of the people plus are not at severe risk, and the numbers are tiny in context for everything else that happens. Right now, 1.35 million people will die this year in a car accident around the world. It's 3,200 people a day. None of us are saying people cause these car accidents, right? There's a little yellow line. Someone's driving 70 miles an hour at you. You're going there. And we know every day somebody's going to fall asleep. Somebody's going to be texting. Someone's going to be drunk, and they come over and kill people every day, 3,200 a day. But we don't say we're never going to drive again. Let's put a moratorium on driving. And why do we drive? How do we drive? Knowing that someone can kill us every day. It could happen any moment. We do it by using faith, not a religious term, just we're born with a faith that says, if I don't create certainty in myself in spite of all the things that are risky, I have no life. I have to stay home and not move, which is kind of what we're doing right now. So let's talk about either some of the solutions, but maybe first, before the solutions, let's talk about cellular medicine for a moment and your original studies and what you found, because this goes way beyond COVID. We're going to talk about COVID-19 and your solutions, but it really is the breakthrough that's happening in regenerative medicine. It's probably the most powerful change in medicine that's happened in a century.
The other thing to contextualize this again is if you feel like COVID-19 is going away and it's not as bad as it is, again, remember, this is one of many pandemics. One of the questions that we're going to be asking Bob to address here is, how do we prevent this from happening again? How do we actually put in place the mechanisms to keep us safe? And one thing that we did learn from all this data is, 100 to 1, older people are dying than younger people. It's not that the virus understands a person's age. It's that we understand your immune system. We're constantly being infected by viruses, by cancers, and your immune system is an incredible